The Benjamin Dixon Show is only possible with listener support. Go to www.thebenjamindixonshow.com to register for our blog and join the Progressive Army.
Yep. Welcome to the Benjamin Dixon Show. I am your host, Benjamin Dixon. Today is Friday, April 3rd, 2020. Thanks so much for joining me. I've got a jam-packed show, and I will even have a Saturday show, at least a Saturday interview. I'll be speaking tonight with my homegirl, Malaika Jabali. Some friend I am. I can't even pronounce my sister's name right. But actually, no, that's not fair. I can't pronounce anyone's names right. But that's my homegirl, and she'll be joining me this evening. We'll be having a Skype conversation specifically talking about the Me Too movement and the disappearance of the Me Too movement in honor of Joe Biden. Joe Biden seems to have been able to completely kill the Me Too movement. And I don't feel qualified to speak on it on my own, seeing as I'm a guy and I just know my role. But I'll be speaking with Malaika Jabali. She has written in several places, several media outlets. Most recently, she is with theguardian.com. So I'll be speaking to her. Also in this episode, I'll be speaking to my young revolutionary brother, Q. We just call him Q, not QAnon. Don't mistake him for any of that foolishness. But when you hear him, you've heard him on the show before. When you hear him, you'll know why he can never be mistaken for those clowns over there. Also, I have an interview. Professor Matt Sinkowitz facilitated an interview for me, and I will be including that in this episode. So you're going to hear a lot of different voices in today's episode, as well as the bonus episode that's coming out tomorrow. So stay tuned for all of that. I want to start by talking about Jason Hargrove, who was a Department of Transportation bus driver in Detroit. Detroit Department of Transportation. He went live on Facebook about 2 weeks ago, and he was complaining about a passenger who coughed multiple times on his bus without covering her mouth. In that video, he urged passengers to do better. That brother has died of COVID-19. And the reason I want to start with his story is because we are playing with fire, and no one is really talking about the crisis, the second wave of this crisis. Now, these people are going to, the second wave of this crisis may not even get the distinction of a title, right? They're probably all going to just be lumped in with the people who are currently dying. But the second wave is really going to be the essential workers who are still keeping this entire system operating. The bus drivers, the food service workers, the people who are stocking the shelves at your store, the postal workers, the people who are out there on the front lines. I'm not speaking this on them. It's just a reality. The people at Amazon who are packaging all of your supplies that are still being shipped to your door. The people working for Instacart who are putting the food packages together for you and delivering it to your door. All of these people who have maintained this system, right? They have kept the system from collapsing underneath the pressure of social distancing. They're the next round of victims because they're currently being exposed to it right this minute. And in some cases, their employers are not giving them any type of protection whatsoever. Now, the reason they matter, beyond the fact that they are our brothers and sisters and their lives absolutely matter, and they're sacrificing themselves on behalf of all of us bourgeois Negroes. I guess we turned up already, right? And in this case, I'm referring to everybody who has the luxury of staying home, including myself. All of us who have the luxury of staying at home in this season. The only reason we can stay at home and we're not out in the streets trying to search for food is because of the people who work at Instacart and are still stocking the grocery stores. So we may not consider ourselves to be part of like the elite, but in this moment, we are the most privileged. Every single one of us who don't have to go out there in order to maintain their essential worker, their jobs. Those of us who can do networking from home, right? Those of us that could do IT from our computer. We just remotely connect in. We are all a part of a privileged class of people who have the luxury of not coming home every night, potentially bringing the virus home to our children. And they are the next wave. And when I say the next wave, I don't mean they're all going to die. I pray none of them die. But one or two things is going to happen. They're either going to strike or they're going to get sick. And once they strike in earnest across the board, or they get sick and they can't go in, then there's going to be a shortage, not in terms of supply. There's still probably, and then, let's go further down the supply chain. The people who are still out there bringing food to market. Not big corporate farmers, but the people out there who are literally packaging your food, chopping down the harvest, packaging, like still doing the work behind the scenes that we all have taken for granted. Once that, listen, the domino effect is so obvious, but our leaders are acting as though everything is going to be just fine without providing some type of assistance, some type of protection, some type of reassurance. When I say reassurance, I don't mean just kind words. I'm talking about supplying them with the supplies they need, with the health coverage that they need, with the PPE that they need. Our government, both federal and local, federal, state, and local, is acting as though this back line of workers, the most essential part of our economy, they're acting as if these guys are immortal. They're acting as though they are just going to be there and that there's enough labor force to replace them. This is what it really is. They think that there's enough labor force to replace these people and everything will just keep going. But do you think they're going to be bus drivers who step up to replace Jason Hargrove after we know why he died? Why would a person? See, it's one thing to maintain the work that you've been doing and you don't really know exactly how bad this situation is. And so you end up getting caught in the crossfire of COVID-19 and you become a victim of it. But do you think there are going to be workers who actually step up and say, hey, I want to take that job. I want to be the bus driver now. I want to be the clerk, the store clerk now. Now that these workers, this last line of workers, they've all either gotten sick, they've all instituted a strike, or some of them sadly have died. You think people are just going to step up and say, hey, I want that job? I think that is the arrogance and the ignorance of our leadership. This misleadership class, both the black misleadership class and the white misleadership class, basically everybody in power right now, every part of the all of the institutions that make up our economy and our political system, they are leading us into destruction because they honestly believe that this machine, this monstrosity of an American machine is just going to keep ticking and that we're going to keep giving them bodies to throw at this system, at this problem, after they've done nothing to protect the frontline workers. It's not going to happen the way they are expecting. And we are getting ready to see a disruption in our supply chain, in our food, in our delivery services like we've never seen before, because we have leadership that is grossly incompetent and not taking the necessary steps. They think that people are just going to continuously throw their bodies on the line for this system. Absolutely not. Absolutely not. And because our leaders have not taken the appropriate steps to protect those frontline workers and to ensure that they have everything they need to be safe, secure, and taken care of, we are going to see disruptions in our supply chain very soon. We'll be right back.
Go to www.patreon.com/The BPD Show and support The Benjamin Dixon Show.
Here we go. Very special welcome and thank you to all of our newest patrons, without whom this show is not possible. Very special welcome to Phoebe Duval. thank you for becoming a patron. Kenan Pearson, thank you for becoming a patron. Gabriel MacArthur, thank you so much for becoming a patron. Matt Trimble, thank you for becoming a patron. Jeff Rowan, thank you for becoming a patron. Joanne Robbins, thank you for becoming a patron. Aaron, hey man, thank you so much for supporting the show. Thank you for becoming a patron. Philo Marks, thank you for becoming a patron. Ryan Call, thank you for becoming a patron. And very special thank you to Timothy Appel, Bill Clinton, Derek Ellis, Lazinator, Michael Monroe, and Benjamin B. Bixon. Thank you for increasing or editing your pledge. You too can become a part of this prestigious and prodigious patron family by going to patreon.com/the BPD show, where you get twice the content with none of the advertisements like you're going to hear right here. Okay. Joining me now is my brother from another mother. This young man has a podcast called Fragmented Podcast. I have shared his content before. He's been on the podcast before. He makes me jealous that he's so young and has so much figured out already that I was figuring out in my late 30s. Q, thanks so much for joining me, brother. How you doing this morning?
Yo, what's going on, man? I feel good. Ready to talk about some politics. This is long overdue.
Yeah.
This is very long overdue.
Yeah.
But there's been so much going on. I feel like this is the perfect time to do it. So
yeah. And here's what I've come to terms with. There are positions that you have held. And you know, we have group chats that we talk in, and I am probably the least radical person in the group. And I'm coming to terms with the fact that you guys have been right all this time, particularly on a couple of topics. I tried my best for many, many years to be patient with the Black Misleadership class because of the opposition that because of the racial dynamic. It's hard to be able to critique our Black Misleadership class when so much racism is thrown at them. But now everything has been revealed. This COVID-19 has revealed the primaries first, but now COVID-19 has just revealed everything. And we are being led not only by a death cult in the Republican Party, but we are being led by the most feckless, intentionally feckless group of Democrats, which include the Black Misleadership class. Let's just start it there. What are you thinking?
Man, I think that we should probably couch this probably in South Carolina, if I'm not overstepping. I'm thinking that South Carolina was probably the turning point for me completely, where I've lost all love for the Black Misleadership class. You know, respect to the ones who put their bodies on the line in the 60s for the civil rights movement, and really appreciate that. And that stuff cannot be disrespected. That work cannot be thrown out. I do respect that. However, when we're talking about the Black Misleadership class as it relates to Black working class, they replicate the same oppressive and neglectful mentalities and policy action towards us as any other person in power does. And the way that they basically catalyze us into the Democratic Party is by shaming us with that legacy of the civil rights movement. Mm-hmm. And we've seen how they will leverage that against the youth. Like, y'all don't know anything. We were the ones getting bit by, dogs and fire hoses.
Yep.
And that work is so real, and that work is valid. And I'm never going to ever disrespect somebody who did that. I want to reiterate. But it has to be said that the Black Misleadership class played basically the firewall for Joe Biden. They played his bulletproof vest, and they volunteered that. Especially, the South Carolina Democratic Party, they played bulletproof vest for Joe Biden and essentially stopped the working class movement of Sanders and got everyone to coalesce. Yep. It's hard for me to even think about the amount of suffering and pain that our community is going through right now.
Yeah.
While we have people in our community who come from out of our neighborhoods, who come out of our schools, who come out of our HBCUs, and they end up going to Capitol Hill. They end up going to some, consultant firm. They end up going to some law firm, and then they forget about where they come from. and then they turn around and be Dr. King in public, but be Don King in private. That shit it doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
It doesn't compute, and we're seeing now that the black youth is almost revolting against this neoliberal turn that has happened since the 80s.
Yeah. So South Carolina is a flashpoint. The primaries in general, South Carolina is a flashpoint. I had a chance to meet Jim Clyburn. We did a spot on MSNBC like right after each other. And I feel I get it. I grew up around those leaders. I grew up because, every black community across the country has some venerated leader who has some type of loose connection to the civil rights movement. If not, like John Lewis here in Atlanta, a very direct connection to the civil rights movement. So it's hard as a young black person growing up, seeing these leaders to transition away. And it's a generational thing. Here's how we're going to see the divide between my generation and your generation. Right. So for me, it was more about how long can I continue to support these fools before I just have to throw the hammer down. And then for you all, I think it's more of like you probably were not indoctrinated as, or even if you were indoctrinated the same way my generation was, you had a concurrent movement that was happening around you of revolutionary people. Even the term that we're using, the Black Misleadership class, like that did come from like an older gentleman. I believe it was either Glenn Ford or Bruce Dixon, but I know it's definitely from the Black Agenda Report. And so it's not necessarily generational. It's more about your ideology and what you read and what you consume. But for a lot of us, we were stuck because we were raised to honor these people. And now we see a very clear distinction between what their agenda is and what is needed for the majority of the people in the black community. And so when the firewall, the Black Misleadership class, presents themselves, and we'll get into some specifics. We're kind of talking generally here. But they present themselves as a sacrifice for Joe Biden, who clearly has an agenda that is detrimental to the black, or rather, even if it's not directly detrimental, his past has been detrimental. But the future, what he wants to do is nothing. It doesn't change any of the material conditions for the majority of the black community. And here we are now in this position in the face of a pandemic where you can see it even clearer. Joe Biden is still trying to do the same thing, politics as usual. And we're facing this revolutionary virus that is saying, if you keep doing the same thing as usual, your whole system is going to crash and burn and a whole lot of people are going to die.
Yep. And that right there is essentially my like biggest point, is that the Black leadership class has to reconcile the fact that they are privileging their connections to white capital and they're privileging their proximity to whiteness and power, which is where you will find it centralized in Washington, D.C. and wherever their states, Democratic parties or whatever, rich capitalists they're working for or whatever, right? So at the end of the day, I think what is going to happen as soon as, like this election is over, I think that there has to be a real autopsy done from our community, one that actually looks at the people in power, the people who have influence, the people that we quote unquote have reverence for and whatnot. And it has to be dissected. It has to be questions of what is the utility of this person still being on the news, purporting to be the face of Black America.
Right.
What is the utility of Jim Clyburn betraying the very legacy that Dr. King was killed for?
Right.
What does it mean if we can throw that legacy in their faces and explain that, and all they have to say is, "Be quiet, child. You're too young."
Right.
That's why we're not trying to hear that anymore.
Right.
Because what we have understood is that I know I'm 23 years old, so I grew up in a different generation where it wasn't really much authority for us that could do anything with us. That because it's we're coming from a perspective of technology. We can look things up.
Yeah.
Y'all had to go to the library to see where the wealth was.
Well,
we go on our phones and say, who's the richest man in the world? Oh, Jeff Bezos? Okay, word. Why does he have $157 billion?
Right.
Jim Clyburn. And why should we not use 3% of that wealth tax to make it make sense to me?
An example of how the Black Misleadership class has inculcated a whole new generation of people. I think they're all younger than me. I'm turning 40. I'll have this is completely irrelevant to the conversation, but I'll be turning 40 in the middle of this pandemic. So I'm gonna have to find something online to have something popping with a whole bunch of people. Pandemic party, right? So in my generation, there's a lot of people younger than me, though. The Bakari Sellers of the world, the Simone Sanders of the world, who are adopting this spirit of the Black Misleadership class, in that they are using their position to power. They're using their power, their platform, in order to enrich themselves, which I get it. Everybody wants to secure a bag, but at what price? At what cost? And what they're doing now is they are giving this cover for, first it was Kamala Harris with Bakari Sellers, and now all hands on deck for Joe Biden. Joe Biden, most egregiously, his background is directly detrimental to Black people, as well as his policies, or the lack thereof, for the future. But what we've seen very specifically happen over the last week was them using Kamala Harris, right, and this idea that because her mother died of cancer, that nobody can call Kamala Harris out about her opposition to Medicare for all, which is going to help people who are dying of cancer right now, right? And so there's this disingenuous political jujitsu that they're doing in order to prop up a system that is harming so many people, specifically Black people.
Nah, for real. And the thing is, though, is that's because at the end of the day, we don't have a choice in it. I need people to feel that. This is my perspective. And the data shows that from the 70s on, most policy decisions have been bipartisan. It is only the race. And I'm not saying that these are not big issues. I'm just saying that it is only the race, gender, and other small issues and tweaks around the edges here and there that they'll put on the political theater for us. And no, I'm the Democrats and we're the good ones and you're the Republicans and you're the bad ones. And if you get in power, everything's going to be awful. But if we're in power, nothing is going to change from the last awful presidency. So what's the point? Right? Because it's not a choice. It's the illusion of a choice. Right. So the Black Misleadership class has to dress up the illusion of choice to us.
And the way they dress it up. Go ahead.
They have to say to us that Joe Biden is basically Dr. King reincarnated, and that he is Nelson Mandela's best friend, because that's the only way that you can reconcile and sleep at night. Is I'm going to literally be pushing the architect of the crime bill on my community. I'm going to be pushing the architect of the crime bill who went on the Senate floor and used some of the most disgusting, vile, derogatory language, dog whistle language about Black youth that has been said probably since Hillary Clinton. And you're going to return 4 years right after Hillary Clinton got roasted for that, and then prop this person. And the only difference is now is that we're seeing capital move. See, let me just break that down.
Yeah.
When I'm saying we're seeing capital move, we're seeing that the entire mainstream media, we're seing the Black Misleadership class, we're seeing the white misleadership class, because we think that they're leaders to white people. They're not. They're leaders as well. And we're seeing all of this money being poured into Biden. We're seeing all this money, all this advertising, all the non-stories that are being pushed under the rug that we'll talk about, all the stories that are being pushed to the top, all the good press. It's all going to Biden. And the Black Leadership class's special role in that is to be able to play the cattle herder for Black folks.
Yeah.
We're seeing that in people like Clyburn. You see it in people like Simone Sanders. You see it in people like Bakari Sellers. You see it in, what is his name? Jason Johnson. You see the neoliberal turn has been cemented. Now you have to find a way to make that applicable to the Black working class. The problem is that there's a virus and it's not going to be applicable ever.
Right. I think that's the biggest thing. So here we have, so we started in South Carolina and we've gone through the primaries, generally speaking, in terms of Joe Biden and the games that that our Black leaders, the Black Misleadership class, they're playing in order to cattle herd, the sheep herd, Black people to Joe Biden. I want to move to the virus, but I do want to give one last example. When I was in South Carolina, I met Clyburn. Right after, there was this older guy who was about Clyburn's age who basically hemmed me up at the and I've told the story on the show before, but he really basically pushed me in the corner And had he been a little younger, we would have had to come to some blows, but he was an older guy. So I gave him a little grace. Right. And he was basically, honestly, he was talking so angrily about it. He was spitting in my face. Now, had coronavirus had already been out, I would have, it wouldn't have mattered how old this man was. But he was so angry at me because I was supporting Bernie Sanders, and he kept using his support for Jesse Jackson as a way to justify him as an authority in terms of black politics. The irony of it was, like, a week later, Jesse Jackson would go ahead and endorse Bernie Sanders. But in the midst of all of this happening, the backdrop really was the coronavirus coming around the corner. And now here the coronavirus has really just kind of bitch slapped the entire world, particularly America. And we are seeing all of the problems of our economic system and our political system laid bare. We could see exactly how this economic system that's being protected, not just by Republicans, but also by the Democratic Party and by the black misleadership class. This economic system is perfectly designed to get a lot of us killed. And yet, and still, these Negroes, as well as their white counterparts, are still playing politics as usual. And we're talking about 10 million people now without a job. And when they don't have a job, they don't have any income, nor do they have any health insurance at the beginning of a global pandemic. So the thing for me is how utterly reckless and destructive of them to look at the world changing right underneath us, and for them to still say that we want to oppose Medicare for all and we want to protect capital versus doing what's necessary to save people. And I haven't even gotten to the Republicans. This is the Democratic Party who's still doing the same damn thing, propping up a man who doesn't want to do anything that's going to fix the pandemic that we're currently going into. And yet 10 million people are without jobs, and now their entire families are without insurance. How utterly irresponsible. I think that has to be like the crown jewel of how they are the misleadership class.
Yeah, and the thing is, though, is that they have to be able to maintain legitimacy within certain circles of the black community. The problem is that when you talk to most of these people, you can tell that they ain't been around black folks in years. And I mean black folks, not black folks that you meet at little galas for, you know what I'm saying, this fundraiser or this little meeting here. No, I'm talking about like no fees for a plate where you meet black people at. That's those are the black people I'm talking about. And what we're seeing now is that I would say since probably the 1970s, Richard Nixon and his administration put out a memo, and they put out basically in terms of policy, they were trying to encourage they were trying to encourage black youth to turn away from radicalism. Right. So in turn, they would actually give grants to the FBI, the CIA, and different other government groups to actually go to HBCUs and recruit black folks to come and, be cops, be lawyers, be, I mean prosecutors, be prosecutors, join the army. Yep. And you saw an uptick in these type of occupations held by black people after a certain year in the 70s. I can't remember if it was 1976 or whatever, but it was one of those years. So what we're seeing now is that fast forward to 2020, and we have basically a cemented misleadership class that is more so concerned about their access than they are about their own community. And if we're talking about this virus, we're seeing that, credit card debt is a huge issue. We're seeing that medical debt is the biggest issue. Yep. We're seeing paid time off. People don't have that. We're talking about black mothers who cannot afford to skip work. Meanwhile, these Negroes are over here paying $10,000 a plate to go kiss up to, some, it's absolutely insulting, and it's ridiculous.
Okay. Listen, be sure to check out Q. His handle on Twitter is Q Got No Rings. Q, the letter Q, GOTNORINGS. Check him out on Twitter and check out his podcast. The podcast is Fragment or Fragments. The link is in his bio. So go check the brother out. He has a lot of great stuff to say. There's twice the interview. There's like 30 more minutes of the interview that I'm going to put in the patrons only section. I wanted to do a shift here so that you could hear the interview. It's an interesting and it's an important interview that Professor Sinkowitz did with Sarah Morrison regarding our data privacy in the midst of this pandemic, comparing what's happening in the United States through corporations to what's happening in other countries through the force of the government, where our data is being collected as a means of tracking this virus. In the United States, they give us the appearance that it's voluntary versus in other nations, it is compulsory. So here's that interview with Professor Sinkowitz and Sarah Morrison. Take a listen in.
And now it's my pleasure to bring on to the Benjamin Dixon Show Sarah Morrison. Sarah writes about data and digital privacy for Recode at Vox.com. So, Sarah, you write about digital privacy, the role of technology and surveillance in contemporary society. That brings up some interesting questions as it relates to this crisis. On the one hand, technology can play a role in helping track and prevent spread, but also it comes with that a variety of concerns regarding civil liberties, government surveillance you don't want. Can you just sort of give us an overview where you see the role of technology and surveillance being right now as it relates to the coronavirus crisis?
Well, the interesting thing is in America, it doesn't seem to be so much the government doing this surveillance, and I know there are some legal limits even on what they can do. It's really been more like private companies and the technology and capabilities that they have to really drill down into where individual people, or really cell phones, because I think a lot of this is location data tracking of your phone that presumably is on your person. So they're the ones who are able to, and have made programs that can track massive amounts of data at one time. They seem to be the ones that are really doing have the capability to pinpoint individual people's locations. That doesn't mean that the government has access to that. That's
right.
The question right now.
Right. I mean, when you look internationally, countries that have different privacy laws, different relationships to the technology sector in the country, we're seeing a lot of cooperation between the tech sector and governments in terms of surveillance and tracking. Is that right?
Yeah, I mean, cooperation or compulsion, but either way, there have been. I think the company made an app for the Chinese government that sort of everybody, I think, in certain areas has to have that. Tracks them, says if you're sick or not. They have to, I think, show it in order to get in and out of the train stations and things like that. I think Israel was talking about tapping into it. I think it's anti-terrorism cell phone tracking data, which I think is not a private company, but anyway. And Iran, I believe, had a company make an app that they had people, install on their phone that, I think follows them around. So those are things again, in countries with other laws and maybe, just other cultures, that's so far as we know, not the case here.
Yeah, I mean, I guess, it moves into the realm of prognostication. But I mean, there certainly is, well, let's just say the tech sector and certain governing bodies are awfully close. Do you foresee the sort of the kind of collaboration or compulsion or the kinds of things we're seeing elsewhere? Is there just is that completely beyond the pale of something you could see happening in the United States, or do you think that's something that if we get to a point is ready to go?
I would not see it happening on the way it's happening in other places. The thing I could see happening, in which we've seen some stories saying that places are in talks for this to happen, is the government going to these companies, and I think it's ad tech and location tracking companies. So I think there's a lot of places you probably haven't even heard of. We're not talking, I don't think, about Facebook and Google, but then talking to them about getting their data. So I could see, that being a possibility. And then it remains to be seen, that data is only, I think, as good as how many people they have. And, I don't think these companies, actually, I don't want to even say if they have as much as Facebook or not, but
yeah.
Yeah.
Let's peel that back a little bit, just as a general question, because I mean it's an interesting point broadly, but also could, of course, tie into this crisis we're dealing with. Something like ad tech. What is a company like ad tech? How do they get your information, and how might it be deployed?
Oh, they have, several ways of doing this. I wrote about one company that is promoting to the public a sort of maps of per county, how well they think the people in each county, are doing at social distancing, which for us, when we see it, is on a county level. So pretty, impossible to see individuals. But in order to have that data in the first place, they sort of need to know how far apart individuals are from each other. And so this company can do that is they put like a thing called a software development kit, an SDK, and a bunch of different apps, and that reports back to them location data.
Is there talk of, or could you foresee some sort of something similar, an opt-in sort of thing where we try to encourage people to download an app regarding health status as it relates to the virus and upload that information? Could you foresee that ever being is there like sampling issues? I don't know. Is there any use to that kind of thinking? Places where the government compels, the data is going to be much better. Here, where we don't have that kind of government compulsion, I think that's a good thing. But is there a way that people could use such an app like this to provide information, have the data be useful if it's opt-in, as it relates to the virus?
Yes, actually, I don't have to foresee it because it is happening.
Okay.
There is a smart thermometer company called Kinza, and they are actually, I think they've got, I believe, maybe real time or daily. I'm not sure how often they update it, but they do have maps out there that are looking at people's fevers, right? So you take your temperature, and I believe you choose to opt in. They're pretty upfront that you have a thermometer, and it's a thermometer, and also you can send this information back to us. It's, not de-identified. And we use that to sort of track things like they try to predict where and when the flu is going to hit. I think they've said that they've been accurate with that, and they've been doing that for coronavirus too.
And I guess I would wonder about sampling. Are they? I guess you can't know exactly, but there's a sense that they are getting an adequate and sort of randomized enough group of people. It just seems to me that the kind of people who are likely to choose to share that information just might also have a certain profile as it relates to virus risk, and it seems like it could distort it. I don't know if you have any sense of how they mitigate against, the idea that people who are using certain kinds of technology often have certain lifestyle similarities as well.
Yeah, that's the reason why I've been kind of reluctant to do much about it right now. I do know that they, I believe, distribute some of these for free. I think they said they've distributed, you'd have to check the New York Times article to be sure, but like 500,000 or 1 million, something like that. But they did say, and I know this number, they're getting 162,000 readings a day. So there are a lot more than 162,000 people, in America. And obviously, like you said, there are reasons why, sample size, places in America might have, using more than others. They're more populous than others, more likely to have a better sample size. So, obviously there's some limitations. It's not exactly a scientific study, but they say they've had success predicting these kinds of things before.
Right. It would seem to me that the flu, because we have data going back, decades and decades, you might be able to tease out the bias and kind of account for it. I wonder if that would be the case here. I guess we don't know. To go down a more like the scarier path, let's say things get even worse than they're projected, and they're projected very bad. Is there a mechanism by which we can encourage, or if not compel, people to use these devices in order to provide better and more accurate information? Is that in the United States' toolbox, I guess, in the same way that it might be in other countries?
You can always encourage, right? I do not see a compulsion being a thing here. Anything is possible.
Right.
I've seen actually like privacy advocates loosen a little bit, like their ideas of what the government should and shouldn't know, but with a lot of caveats and just for this. So not entirely loosened, but just, you know, a little bit more of a bend than usual. You know, I could see, you know, companies being more willing to hand over this kind of stuff to the government. I can't see a world where we're all told this is an app you have to install and you all have to walk around and we're going to track you with it. Like I said, anything's possible. I would be shocked if it happened.
Sarah, thanks so much for finding time. Where can people find you online?
Recode.net and I think box.com/recode would be the two places.
Excellent.
So,
and you can follow Sarah at Sarah Morrison on Twitter as well.
Yes, please. Thank you.
Pretty white TT, pretty white TT, pretty white TT, pretty white TT, pretty white TT.
Okay, the rest of that interview is going to be available to the patrons, patreon.com/BPD show, along with the full interview with Q. All of that is going to happen immediately after the closing music. I got a few voicemails this week that had pertinent questions that I think are worth us considering. Take a listen into the first one.
Hey, Ben, Isaac here. Bernie's whole idea of a revolution, do you think that we truly went all in to get the revolution? As in, of course, new media got beat out by old media. So I think one of the ways to express my point would be, do you think that members of new media, such as yourself or David Pakman, do you think you guys should have campaigned not only for Bernie, but with Bernie, as in to bring out, ultimately to buy free TV space? You know, Donald Trump got billions of dollars in free media by saying outrageous things, and progressives being somewhat far left, what we say could be the radicalness that what you guys would say on the stage could be played over and over again as the corporate media is forced to talk about it, and that will also bring awareness. For a lot of progressives, we got drawn into progressivism by new media. So I think that, at least from my opinion, I think if progressives are truly going to get this revolution, I think that we need to go all in, and I want to get your opinion on that.
Yeah, thanks for the call, Isaac. So for me, I don't know how much more all in some voices could have gone. Like Kyle Kalinske, he was certainly all in for Bernie. I think I was the least all in, or at least I waited to the very end to get all in, for my own reasons. But I don't know here's how we really got beat this time. And there's a full autopsy. There's several quote unquote autopsies of the campaign that are going around. The campaign's not over yet. And the reason the campaign is not over yet is because of the coronavirus, and because reality is proving Bernie Sanders right. Reality is endorsing Bernie Sanders, right? And I think that's part of the reason why there's so much urgency. They're willing to send people out to their deaths in Wisconsin, the Biden campaign, while the Democratic Party of Wisconsin, the local party members, they're all calling for the primary to be delayed because of the coronavirus. Joe Biden went on television yesterday and saying, no, it's go ahead and wipe your hands, wash your hands, and go out there and vote. It's going to get a lot of people killed because reality is endorsing Bernie Sanders. Therefore, the campaign is not really over, because Bernie Sanders is advocating for the very things that we need to win this battle against the coronavirus. Now, in terms of your question, in terms of what the new media particularly could have done more, I don't really know what the new media could have done more, because, they were really all in for a long time. Now, I have been all in the entire time for the progressive policies, right, for Medicare for all. But I think if I were to cut to what you're saying is it really isn't so much on the progressive media as much as it is on Bernie Sanders' campaign to utilize progressive media, right? And to bring those voices to the campaign rallies, and to be radical, and to just embrace the radicalism without any apology, right? Without any reservation. Could they have done that? Yeah, I think they could have done that more. But new media, man, they did their part. We did our part, advocating either directly for policies or advocating directly for the candidate, like I've seen over and over and over again. But now the whole game has changed. And I think if I look at the date on your, I got your voicemail like last week, but I wanted to bring it in this week. If we look at how the world has changed around us right now, there's not a person in the country who could question whether or not this entire game has changed. And by game, I mean the entire political economy has changed. It's being forced to change. The coronavirus is forcing the change, and it's endorsing Bernie Sanders because of Bernie Sanders offering policies that are going to directly confront this new world. And here's what ultimately I'm saying. The establishment, they were able to play their games, the same games that they've been playing for years to crush the progressive movement. But they don't have another skill set. They don't have another toolkit. All they have are the same BS tactics to crush the left without doing anything to even touch the right, right? They continuously push this country to the right because of the same, but those games don't work right now. They do not work in terms of the real problems that these 10 million people who are now newly unemployed over the last 2 weeks are facing. In fact, I think playing those same games is going to be the death of the establishment, the Democratic establishment specifically. I think it is more likely that Donald Trump is going to win a re-election and somebody like Jeff Bezos is going to become like the de facto leader of this country because of the Democratic Party not offering radical solutions to a radical problem. And so because the Democrats are honestly just in this with nothing in their hands, nothing to offer, no counter bills, no bills to say, to really draw a distinction between what the Republicans are doing and what the people really need. Who is out there pounding the pavement on behalf of working people, or now a lot of non-working people in the face of this pandemic, except for Bernie Sanders, who is getting shunned by the media? Well, you can only shun him so long because people don't need Bernie to bring it to their attention anymore. Reality is bringing it to them. Reality is making all of these people see something has to change. And because the Democrats are not offering anything to help change this system, well, people just aren't going to show up and vote for them at all. While Donald Trump's sycophants who are willing to die on his behalf, they'll gladly go to the polls in November and enthusiastically reelect Donald Trump. So what's happening is that the games that the Democratic Party has been playing for years simply is not going to work. Not only is it not going to work, but it's going to destroy them and potentially destroy this country because they're not providing opposition sufficient enough to stop the madman in chief in the White House. So I don't think it was much more that the media could have done. Maybe there was more that Bernie Sanders could have done in terms of embracing independent media. But all of that has changed dramatically since you left this voicemail because the coronavirus is doing all of the revolutionary moves. Okay, that's going to be it for the public show. My music is coming in here. We're going to pick up the party after this music. Patrons, you know what to do. Stay tuned. Everyone else, if you want access, go to patreon.com. You're going to get twice the content, the rest of the interviews, plus a lot more. Patreon.com/the BPD show. If not, be safe out there, and I'll see you Monday. Everyone else, all the patrons, I'll see you in a few seconds.
The Benjamin Dixon Show is only possible with listener support. Go to www.patreon.com/the BPD show and support the Benjamin Dixon Show. If you like this episode, be sure to share, like, and subscribe.